Good morning, everyone. I'm Dick Levinson. On behalf of the Senior Center here at Central, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our program this morning. Our focus today is on what it's actually like to be a hostage negotiator for the FBI. And our guest, Mark Thundercloud, who is retired now, did this difficult and demanding job for many years. I'll be introducing him in just a few minutes, but before I do, there's several points I want to touch on briefly. First, I want to tell you that our next program will be produced on Friday, July 25th at 11 o'clock in the morning. Our focus at that time will be on a program called Who Was Pontius Pilate? Well, everybody knows what Pilate did, but very few people have a real sense of what this Roman bureaucrat was like as a person. And that's where we hope to begin. A quick reminder now that you can shoot a question to our guest, Mark Thundercloud, at any point during the program this morning. Just look for the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. That's where you would go to type a question for Mark. He's happy to respond to your questions and will at the end of our interview. Now, we would love to have you on our mailing list. And if you're not there already, joining is so easy to do. Just shoot me an email at Levinson, it's Levinson, Levinson R, at freelibrary.org. Now, here are some things you should know about our guest this morning. His law enforcement career began in 1981 when he was a policeman in Milwaukee. He joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1987 and was assigned to their regional office in Spokane. And as early as 1989, he received the basic training that he would need as a hostage negotiator. And as early as 1994, he was working with local police departments in the region to help them make the best use of the knowledge and skills that he acquired. Well, in 2002, he was promoted to the FBI Crisis Negotiations Unit, where he and a number of other supervisors responded in critical situations. And I'm talking about kidnappings, hostage taking, and people barricading themselves into an office or an apartment. And so Mark went on over time, again with others, to actually be in charge of the FBI's crisis negotiation program. And ultimately, there were about 375 special agents who were working as crisis negotiators. I've gotten to know Mark a little, and I know that he's a pretty modest guy, and he would never say that he was an eyewitness to history. But in fact, that's exactly what he is, because Mark Thundercloud was there on the scene during the standoff at Ruby Ridge. He was on the ground in Boston in the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombing. Again, he was on the scene at the Standing Rock Native American Reservation in North Dakota, where there was a dispute about that pipeline that I think many of us will remember. In 2011, Mark received a special award for meritorious service from the FBI director based on successful negotiations that he had concluded that resolved an episode of maritime piracy off the coast of Somalia. So with that as general background, let's just jump right in here. And the first thing that I would like to ask Mark is, what is it that Hollywood and TV movies always get wrong when they depict the situations and the people that you know so well?
Yeah, that's a good one. Mostly everything, but I would say that the thing they get wrong is that it depicts something that's very exciting when most of the time it's not. And most of the time, what we're trying to do, in fact, all the time, we're trying to diffuse emotions and calm things down rather than elevate and make things exciting. So So I would say that that's the number one. They try to make something that's not so exciting exciting.
You were there in Boston, in the aftermath of that terrible tragedy. What do you remember about that? What stands out in your mind when you think about it?
Well, I was not. I was there, and we did attempt to call out one of the subjects. The two, or actually three, of my colleagues that were there actually did call out one of the subjects from the boat, if you recall. So, to me, what struck me is that the most was how everything shut down. The city completely shut down, and rightly so, because of the manhunt that was occurring. So that struck me as the most interesting thing. Things were just the streets of a major city and surrounding areas were barren, basically. So that was very interesting to me.
Can you tell us about the worst moments that you ever had on the job?
As a negotiator, the worst moment,
Yes.
yeah, I would say that the times when things did not go well, either victims were killed or injured, which happened very rarely, but those were the times that you really feel bad, because a lot of people are trying to help the basically the survivors, the loved ones of kidnapped victims, for example, and and there's not a success, not due to not due to us necessarily, but due to the subjects who were involved in the kidnapping, carrying through with maybe threats or just outright murder or maiming. So those are the worst times, obviously.
Mark, from having spoken to you before, I know that a critical part of the job is attempting to establish rapport and build trust. And I think one question, that a lot of our viewers are probably considering about now is, God, how can you do that with people, I mean, who are known uh, liars and con artists? That's sort of hard to compute.
Yeah, you're right. It is difficult, and it takes a certain personality, I think, to get involved and be very good at this. What we did, and no qualms or no hard feelings for people that don't want to do this, because it takes a lot of understanding or attempting to understand, and being non-judgmental. So if you have strong opinions about one thing or another, where it affects, how you react or how you behave, then maybe this is not the thing for you. You just have to you have to be able to look at things from different perspectives and different angles. To me, that's the most important thing. And also listen. A lot of our training is merely just based on listening and understanding certain viewpoints. So, and understanding that emotions, and intense emotions, especially, lead to behaviors that sometimes are negative. So, if that makes any sense to you.
What would you say are the most important lessons you've learned about human nature and how human beings operate from the years that you've spent on the job?
Yeah, that's a tough one. what what I've learned is that nothing should surprise you. You see the most oddest, strangest, negative, um, and I say negative because we were called in for things that you know that had gone awry, or things were negative. So, to me, what was most shocking is that you learn to accept that nothing is surprising anymore. Some of the things that you see. So, that's what I've learned anyway. That if you hear something out of the ordinary, um, it's not really surprising anymore.
Could you take one of your favorite cases, and let me be clearer. Could you take one of the cases that you're most proud of and sort of briefly walk us through what happened and explain how things played out?
Yeah. there's most the vast majority of cases end positively for the hostage and kidnapping cases, and even for most non-kidnapping cases, things end positively, meaning that everybody walks out uh, uh, unharmed, including the bad guy. That's a success as well. So I would say that the one thing that was really interesting case was the case that I worked involving a family from Lynchburg, Virginia, where a mother and son were kidnapped over in the Philippines, and it lasted, when I say from July to December so it lasted a long time, and there were a lot of different moving parts in that case, and it wound up very positively. Not necessarily based on what we did. We did our best, but the young man is a 14-year-old at the time. He was able to escape, and in at the time it seemed like we were going to um, continue with the case for months, and he was able to escape and get out, which completely surprised us in a positive way, obviously. So that was my and look, it's a long story. It's like I said, it's months long, but that sticks out in my mind as one of the most surprising and positive cases.
I I have to ask you about Ruby Ridge in part because that's kind of a cultural touchstone, and I guess people on the left and people on the right tend to disagree about what it should stand for or what it represents. So because that was a long time ago now in the
Right.
modern media world in which we're living, could you take us back and sort of explain what happened in that situation and then
I'll try my
explain
best.
what your role was?
Yeah, I'll try my best. Most people do not know anything about that case just because of time that has passed. But to me, that case exemplifies whatever could go wrong did go wrong. Um, Essentially, and this is a nutshell. I don't have any notes in front of me or anything like that, but in a nutshell, you had a family who was anti-government, who had kind of conspiratorial delusions. In fact, that moved from the state of Idaho. I'm sorry, that moved from the state of Iowa to a remote part of northern Idaho, and thinking that eventually there was going to be a confrontation with the government. And I'm not really making light of it. This is another example of how odd things are. And actually what happened is what they thought would happen. There was a confrontation with the government, and it did end in tragedy. Um, not only for that family, but for law enforcement, the law enforcement family as well. So essentially, you had a family that moved from Iowa to Idaho, and with these, I would say, call them delusions, that the government was out to get them, and they didn't get themselves involved in some activity that caused a law enforcement response. In that there was some illegal weapons, and then ATF became involved. There was a court order that was ignored, and then the Marshal Service became involved to try to bring them to justice, in a sense to get them to court because they were betraying an order. And then once there was a marshal that was killed in the confrontation early, that really kicked off the whole thing as far as our involvement. And then once the marshal was killed, that that caused the FBI, who investigates murder of federal officers, to become involved. So you had ATF initially involved, then the marshals, and then the FBI. And um, then over the course of, I think it was 11 days, there was some more violence, and ultimately the family surrendered. But there were three that were dead, and one and two wounded. So ultimately, based on the initial incident, which was very difficult to overcome from a negotiation perspective, there was a peaceful resolution in the end, where Randy Weaver came out with his infant and two other daughters. His son Sammy was involved in the altercation with the marshals, where a marshal was killed and he was killed. So it was tragic, no doubt, and Vicky Weaver was also killed um, during the incident. So it was everything that could go wrong did go wrong from if you look at it from a high altitude. That's in my opinion that's what happened. It was a tragic event for everybody.
Do people in law enforcement um, study that event in an effort to learn, what not to do and what mistakes
You know,
not to make?
I can't speak for all law enforcement. The thing is, there's so many other cases that that is between then and now that a lot of these things, are forgotten. To be honest with you, even in the FBI, I mean, there's other cases that occurred after that where we're learning from, the Waco standoff, and that happened afterwards, and then and multiple others in between. So I think time erases to a degree a lot of these things from people's minds, and they didn't, and people that were there aren't around anymore, so they get forgotten for the most part.
Mark, one thing that I wanted to ask you is when you find yourself in a situation where you're talking to somebody on the phone and it becomes apparent pretty quickly that this person, not terribly articulate, probably hasn't put a lot of thought or planning into what they did or are doing. Maybe they were sort of driven to it in a desperate moment. When you are working with somebody, I mean, who is not necessarily evil as much as just a hot mess. How are you supposed to respond in that kind of situation?
Well, I think it goes back to trying to understand where the person's coming from, that perspective. Also, we'll try to adapt to whomever we're talking to if we can. The other thing is learning motivation. Motivation, what's motivating the behavior is extremely important to us, in that we can take different strategic avenues depending on what exactly is motivating the person. If the person's having a bad day, bad days, and multiple stressors in life, which we all suffer from sometimes. It's just how we react to them. That's really the difference. Then we'll take a different approach as to a person who's kidnapping another person for ransom. That motivation is purely money. So then it becomes completely different than a person who's having multiple stressors and reacting badly to them in a way that causes law enforcement response. So it really depends on the motivation of the subject. Is how we approach the person. And again, we'll look at it from their perspective, or try to. And the way we do that is to listen and try to understand.
If I've kidnapped someone or I'm holding someone hostage, but I haven't killed anybody. I mean, I haven't, committed any great acts of violence, but I'm still guilty of kidnapping somebody and holding somebody for hostage. Um, if at the end, everybody walks out of that space, nobody, thank God, has been killed or physically injured. Um, what kind of prison time would I be looking at?
That there's a lot of factors that go into that, Dick. It would be your criminal history, depending on what crime you committed. Um, there would be a number of factors that went into that. What your mental state was, as far as mental health. Maybe you have a diagnosed mental illness. So there's a lot of different factors that would come into any type of sentencing.
Okay, so like many other things in life, much more complicated than it would seem to be on the
Yeah, absolutely.
surface.
It's
So, I think that when a lot of people think about you and the situation that you and your colleagues, I mean, have chosen to put yourself in, um, people like me think, gosh, there's a terrible amount of stress, associated with this job. Things are very, very difficult. And if, God forbid, I mean, something goes wrong or I make a mistake, um, somebody dies, or sometimes, several people die. Um, gosh, what attracted you to to a job like that?
Yeah, that's kind of a good question. Well, one of the persons that got me involved early was a senior agent when I went to Spokane, the Spokane, Washington office. So he was a negotiator, so he got me interested in it. Um, he was traveling and doing interesting things that I thought were good. So that really motivated me, I guess. And again, it's about a person's certain personality that's required. I think I'm a pretty open and open-minded, non-judgmental person, so I think that certainly helps. But yeah, it's and here's the thing, Dick. You're involved in some incidents that can be very serious and major, and it's kind of wanting to be part of that, in my opinion. What we said, and this is not, we didn't make this up or anything, but pressure is a privilege. We use that quite a bit to be selected to get involved in something where the stakes are high and try to do something positive. That's how we looked at a lot of these events. Let's get in there and do our best. And when other people maybe don't want to, or realize that they don't have the maybe the personality to do it. So we were part of a team that responded to these events. There was not only negotiators, obviously, but there are tactical people, there are investigators, there's a command structure, and all of these folks go to these incidents with the intent of doing the best they can in a positive way.
One of the things I've wondered about for a long time is, do hardened criminals and other people that you wind up dealing with in this line of work, do they respond differently when the agent or the police person engaging them is a woman?
Um, I'm sure it happens, but it's when it comes to a negotiator, a lot of times it's practicality. And when there's an incident that's ongoing or that just kicked off, a lot of times it's whoever shows up first, that's a negotiator, gets involved and it tries to develop an immediate rapport with the subject, with the individual that's in crisis. And then, and if that occurs if there's progress that's being made, then, it doesn't matter who the negotiator is. We're going to leave that person on because there's an already established rapport. So, in my mind, um, generally no, generally no, but there's always exceptions, I guess. And I never really, I don't have any incidents where it mattered, but I'm sure there's other negotiations across the country and all the police departments that probably would say differently. That maybe they did have a case where it mattered if it was a female or a man. So, my personal experience is that it didn't matter.
So, Mark, one of the things that's sort of intriguing about your professional profile is that in addition to all the things that you've done domestically, you've worked in Africa, you were involved in situations in Afghanistan. Um, could you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, how did you happen to get involved in Afghanistan, and what were you specifically doing?
Well, what we did as a part of the negotiation unit, and we were based out of Quantico, Virginia. That's where our critical incident response group is. And again, that's negotiators, tactical people, bomb techs, a whole cadre and array of disciplines that would respond if necessary to major events. How the negotiation unit got involved in some of these overseas events were kidnapped Americans. If an American is kidnapped in some of these places, that is a crime that's investigated by the FBI. So we would respond as needed, and if we were invited by the host country. So there are some places that we went routinely, and other places that we couldn't get to because, again, the host country has to invite us into their country to assist. So that's how we travel to these places, involving actual cases of kidnapped Americans. Now we did do special event travel, meaning there's contingency personnel that travel to the Olympics, travel to World Cups, soccer World Cups, and that's what we did. In addition to kidnap Americans, so we did travel, but most of the time it was kidnapped individuals. But on occasion, we did go to the special events where the FBI was invited to participate as a contingency in case anything would happen, terror event or whatever.
As we said in the introduction, I mean, you received a special award for meritorious service from the FBI director for a case that focused on piracy. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was a case of I don't know if you ever saw the film Captain Phillips with Tom Hanks played Captain Phillips, but it was that case. It was a case where um, a commercial tanker was boarded by Somali pirates, and there was a confrontation on the ship, and then they were able to secure one of the lifeboats with Captain Phillips, and then they were attempting. Well, they fled the Maersk Alabama ship um, on the lifeboat, and they were headed toward the Somali coast with Captain Phillips, and there was some Navy personnel, Navy ships in the area that were able to cut them off, and then tried to communicate, and then they contacted the FBI, and then we became involved to attempt to um, really just try to defuse the situation and get the three Somali pirates or four, try to get them to release Captain Phillips and go on their merry way, or be taken into custody, whatever it may have been. So that was a case that we were involved in, and in the end, we did get one of the pirates off who was injured, and he was arrested and actually um, taken to the U.S. and tried and convicted. And the other three weren't so lucky in that the naval operators killed them after it became very violent, and they were running out of a certain drug that they had, and they became more erratic. And so the decision was made to kill the pirates, and then obviously Captain Phillips survived and was rescued.
A number of your colleagues, even though I don't know the names, have written books, have gone on lecture tours, have done all sorts of stuff because this material is just so inherently interesting. I get the feeling that you've never been tempted to do any of those things. Why not?
Well, I just stopped working, not too long ago. So, um, and who knows, I might do something. But it just, that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe I should. Maybe I should write something. We'll see.
What sort of, earlier we were talking about the fact that Hollywood has a vested interest, obviously, in playing things up and making everything dramatic and exciting, which is the polar opposite of what you're actually attempting to do. So clearly, the Hollywood people have their own needs that they have to satisfy. What sort of misconceptions do you think the average American has about this work and how it proceeds?
Well, I would say the average perception is that there is totally good and totally bad people. There's a lot of people that are in between that get involved in these situations because of life stressors. Everybody has a breaking point, and I'm not making excuses for behavior, but that's what happens. People go through separations, divorce, what have you, and they react based on intense emotions, and that anybody can understand because we do react. It's just how how we react to those things. So I think there's always people, especially Hollywood, trying to make it black or white, good or evil, and we all know that's not really how life works.
In your experience, how often are children really at the root of whatever is happening? And along with that, in your experience, are children sometimes harmed or killed, or does that rarely happen?
Well, when it comes to people being held against their will, like in domestic situations, um, we had a database that we kept, and most of the incidents that the police are going to, they're responding to, involve family matters, involve issues with people that have relationships with the people that they're holding. So yeah, more than likely kids are involved. It's probably some type of love relationship or something along those lines. And a lot of times it's people that are going through divorce and separation. And but and you read the news. There's always we always thought, there's a lot of people that say, oh, she could never hurt their children, or he would never do that to their children. But if you read the headlines, people, parents, unfortunately, do terrible things to their own children based on whatever motivation they have. And there was an incident out here in Washington State where they're still looking for the guy in the mountains of central Washington, where he was going through a divorce and he took his three daughters and murdered them at a campground. And they're still looking for the guy right now. So, that happens too frequently, right?
Yes.
And these are young kids under 10. So figure
Oh
try to figure that
God,
out.
that that is really an
Yeah,
awful, awful situation.
yeah, of course.
Mark, when we spoke earlier, one of the things you said to me, and this made, I think, a lasting impression on me. You said that when a hostage negotiator is working and attempting to uh, build rapport, establish mutual respect with the person on the other end of the phone, one of the chief things that you never ever do is lie to the person that you're working with. What are some of the other things that a negotiator should never do?
Well, I mean, everything is very circumstantial. Everything is a lot of it's dependent on the actual negotiation and communication. It's hard to say never, and even if we don't encourage lying to when we're talking to someone and try to establish rapport, because obviously if you're caught in a lie, um, then that's going to ruin it. The person's not going to trust you. So, but on the other hand, if the incident is so, if it's lacking progress, if it's deteriorating, you might have to use a ruse to try to end the situation with a tactile event where you might need to you might need to lie to the person to make the person more vulnerable. So it's really dependent on the success or the what do I want to say, the how it's going, the you're assessing the successfulness of I know that's kind of weird, but you're assessing all the time of how the negotiation is going. So generally speaking, it's negative to lie, but there are circumstances where you might need to set up a different outcome. Now, we will try our hardest up to the very last point to get everybody out of that crisis site, um, out safely, including the bad guy. But ultimately, it's the bad guy's behavior or it's a subject's behavior that really drives the event. If the and a lot of these people are suicidal. A lot of these people don't care about themselves, let alone anybody else. So, um, you know, we discourage lying, obviously, because that's gonna cause an issue with the rapport. Um, but everything is really circumstantial and dependent on the incident. So I don't know if that answers your question. Maybe that was too long.
No, that was fine. One thing I wanted to ask you, you have worked in a number of foreign countries. How much more complicated do things become if an interpreter, is involved as part of the process? Does that make it much more difficult to do what you're hoping to do?
Well, yeah, it's harder. It's harder um, because there's not that one-on-one communication. But one thing it does to our benefit is it stretches time. Most of the events are helped with the passage of time. So if you're working with an interpreter, things go much more slowly, which can cause um, uh, it can lessen and bring down emotional intensity. So we'll use that to our benefit. But that's just a fact of life. If there's a communication problem um, regarding a language, then certainly you need an interpreter. But we'll use that to our advantage the best we can.
So I'd like to tell our audience something that they certainly don't know, but I think will be interested in, which is that Mark is married to Kath, who is a former top police official in the United Kingdom. And so I guess I sort of fell in love with the unlikeliness of that. I mean, it's actually sort of a Hollywood touch in real life. I mean, I don't know how often something like this actually happens, but
It happens all the time.
oh,
Okay.
okay. I was going to say, oh, this must be rare, but so now we know that it's not. But in any case, having offered me as a producer a twofer, gosh, how could I possibly turn that down? So if you don't mind, I would like to ask Kath some questions if she's willing.
Yeah, she's right here. So
Okay. Hi, Kath.
Hi.
I'm Dick Levinson. I want to thank you so much for joining us and participating today. And, you almost never get a chance to talk to important law enforcement officials from two countries. And so, given your former role as the top police official in northern England, I guess the area that abuts or is really adjoining Scotland, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you if there are British practices or police methods that we really don't do here, but would be smart to adopt.
Yeah, that's a really broad question. Obviously, I've never worked with apart from the FBI, of course, but I've never worked with the American policing, and there are massive differences between how we police in England and how we police in America. One of the main differences that is the fact that you're all armed in America. All the officers are armed and we are not in England. And that gives you a different method of policing. When you go to any trouble or anything, you've got to use, well, negotiation skills really for every officer to be able to descale any sort of riots or any sort of trouble. So it's a bit like apples and oranges if you compare American policing to English policing, because of the nature of the beast, that you are all armed over here. You all have different state laws. We have one law for England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So it is a completely different way of policing. I would say it's very similar in that you'll have rural policing over here. You'll have city policing like we do in England. So the city policing is obviously more intense and a lot more difficult. But if you had to say, could we bring anything over here? It's just a different style of policing. Because of the laws, because of what you're enabled to do over here as opposed to England. And the whole judicial system is different as well. So we can sort of arrest people and then interview and gather all that evidence. A lot of it over here is you've got to have the evidence before you kind of go and arrest people. So it's kind of a different kind of environment that you're working in.
Let me ask you this. One of the things that concerns a very broad swath of people about American policing is that in recent years in particular, there seems to be almost a militarization of domestic policing. That, our police, as you point out, are not only armed, but they're armed. They have all sorts of tools now that seem to smack almost more of an army or a military situation than a traditional police one. And I wondered if that concerns you.
I would say that certainly I did 30 years in the police. Certainly from when I joined, they are better equipped, and they probably are in America now to deal with situations. Certainly, because my daughter's in the police now, and they have a lot more like batons and pepper spray and everything. They have a lot more, and they actually they have it all around the waist and everything and things like that. A lot like the American one, other than having a gun. But we certainly haven't gone. We still portray, we still want to do the local policing and the approachable policing, the local Bobby, as we call them over there, the local Bobby on the street that people can come and talk to. And all this community policing is a very good way of policing, because it's a good way of getting intelligence. It's a good way of knowing how your community feel. And yeah, if you go in all armed, it's ideal for riots, and when you've got, obviously, when you're dealing with gangs, etc. There's a situation for different kinds, but the everyday policing, certainly in England, is more of an approachable. Come and talk to me, I'll talk to you, but you've still got to withhold the law.
Do you feel that Britain is becoming a more violent society than it used to be?
No, I don't think so. I think you've got the gangs like you've got over here, which are a lot more organized now with all the social media and everything else that they can do. We've now got a force similar to the FBI now that deal with that at that national level, which we didn't have years ago. Yes, the cities with the drugs and the gangs is you certainly will be armed, etc. So we have to deal with that now. That's why we don't have every officer armed, but we certainly have a car out 24/7 that have armed officers that have guns in the car. They're not actually armed unless they ask them. They can use them in emergency, but they have to ask permission to use the firearm beforehand, which we never had before. So it's giving you the ability to be able to deal with the gangs and the guns that are on the street. But is it more violent? It's probably more prevalent because you see it more in social media, because you hear about it more on the news, etc. But you have to be prepared for it as a police force.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for participating. I'm going to ask you to hang around. And I think now we've come to the part of the program where we give our audience an opportunity to get answers to their questions. So I'm going to click on the question queue and we'll see what we get. One anonymous attendee says, any ideas, courses, or books you could recommend that would help a person improve their negotiation skills?
Oh yeah, shoot, it's escaping my mind. It's Robert Cialdini. Actually, it's a sales. It's almost a sales book. It's one by Robert Cialdini, and yeah, my age is catching up here. I just can't remember the name of the book. But if you look up Robert Cialdini, he's got some pretty interesting books, and a lot of them are based on social principles that make sense. Um, and it's not necessarily for police negotiation, but it is a good book that explains how certain concepts work that we use. For example, I'll give you an example, like the theory of reciprocity, where the police show up and say the person wants water or even like coffee or tea or whatever, and we would say, okay, yeah, let's give them that because now there's a feeling of we did that for him or her, they have to return that. So there are things like concepts like that are useful in all communications, actually, in all negotiations, whether it be law enforcement or business transactions or whatever. It's Robert Cialdini. I just can't remember the name of the book.
Um, my friend Fast Eddie says, Mark, have you ever found yourself feeling sympathetic toward the individual with whom you're negotiating? Perhaps someone fighting a system or a corporation that's done him wrong.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's part of the human experience. A lot of people that go through stressors, you've gone through the same things yourself in some regards, and in some way, it's just again, it's how we react to those. And some people don't have the ability or the structure or the upbringing or whatever you want to call it to deal with these stressors. And others have support systems, others that have friends, family that they can count on, where a lot of people don't. A lot of people, their family is a source of the problem. So yeah, of course we do. Yeah, definitely. We have empathy and sympathy for some people, no doubt.
Let's see. Irina asks, how often do incidents happen that need an FBI negotiator? Do local police departments have negotiators on their staffs?
Absolutely. The vast majority of negotiations in law enforcement are occurring in local departments. And again, it's going back to domestic situations, um, things like that. And they involve, again, they involve people holding other people for emotional reasons rather than instrumental reasons. Like she's not going to leave me, or no, he's not taking the kids, type of thing. And then they become involved, and again, it's emotional. It's not transactional or instrumental. We mostly became involved as from an FBI perspective in my unit, um, either crimes upon federal reservations, meaning Native American reservations, or military installations or national parks where there's a federal jurisdiction. That's how the FBI becomes involved, or through internationally through kidnaps. We did a lot of international kidnappings that most people don't have a clue about the numbers of Americans that get kidnapped. And again, those are transactional in that the people that are committing them want money. It has nothing to do with emotions. They don't know the people. They don't really necessarily want to hurt the people. They just want money.
Irina has a second question here that I think is excellent. She says, at what point do you give up on negotiating and use force or other methods? Are there red lines or triggers that indicate to you that negotiating just will not work?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Obviously, if there's active violence going on in the crisis site, we might try to distract the person, but a command decision has to be made whether or not there's a tactical resolution. So we'll continue negotiating up to the very end, even to the point of distracting the subject if there's a impending tactical, decision that's made. So yeah, we won't give up, but yeah, there's certainly red lines. There's certainly times when negotiation doesn't work.
Yeah, let's see. Uh, ah, we have an anonymous audience member who asks, what type of support does the FBI provide to agents after a negotiating activity?
Well, if it's a critical incident where I don't know what they do right now, but I've been through a couple of different after action. What do I want to call it?
Debriefs.
Debrief. Yeah, well, we all debrief,
Debrief.
but if something has gone completely awry, where you might need counseling, yeah, there's certainly that. There was there, and I've been out of the FBI for 10 years, so I don't know exactly what they're offering now, but yeah, if you're involved in a shooting or something along those lines, you do get you have the opportunity to go, and it's kind of like a counseling getaway, basically. It's for 2 weeks. So yeah, there are things that help people get over traumatic events.
Um, Eddie asks a good question here. How often do you need to negotiate with other people in law enforcement, local police, who may have grown impatient and need to be talked out of uh, dramatic action that may not be necessary?
Well, I don't have any experience with negotiating with another law enforcement person. I don't know if Kath does or not,
No.
but if you look at the statistics, there's an overwhelming skew with law enforcement regarding suicide, military as well. So there are opportunities where you might become involved in a suicide intervention. There's no doubt if that arises. I mean, obviously, if they're successful, there's no negotiation. You just find them dead. But law enforcement has a sad record of suicide. There was an incident up in Juneau, Alaska, that occurred probably 10, 12, 15 years ago, where there was an actual tactical commander that was barricaded and um, negotiating and actually exchanging gunfire with the Juneau police, and that can be found online. It happens, but it's pretty rare where you're actually dealing with a law enforcement person. But as far as suicide interventions, yeah, I mean that would be if you were, you know, that could happen certainly.
Um, Madeline has a great question here. She would like to know if there is an exceptionally high incidence of divorce and or alcoholism among professional negotiators.
Negotiators, I would say law enforcement in general, yes, to both. I don't know about negotiators specifically, but generally speaking, we're all law enforcement first and foremost. Negotiation is kind of a duty that, and you can explain that, Kat, better than I can. She worked for a police department. I worked for a police department for 6 years and went to the FBI. It's a little bit different, law enforcement perspective, but Kath can maybe answer that one better than I can.
I think it's more if you look at you work very closely with colleagues, you work under stressful situations, you look for them for support, you look for them to be there for you, you want to talk to them because they know about what you're on about. And that closeness is probably what causes a lot of the issues within marriages and the high level of divorces that happen within police enforcement. But it's the same in any sort of nursing, help,
Yeah.
but anyone that has to work under traumatic situations or dealing with traumatic situations on a daily basis. I dealt with mostly homicide, so I dealt with a lot of traumatic situations, and you don't want to bring that into your family with your children, but you talk about it at work.
Okay. Valeria makes some interesting points here. She says, you say it takes a certain personality. I once worked on a suicide crisis intervention phone line. This probably pales compared to what you did, but I say it also takes a strong desire to help. Our training was extensive, and halfway through, half the class was gone. It's definitely not for everyone. What did your training consist of? And then at the end, she says, I enjoyed your wife's input, a different stance, but you're still birds of a feather. Thank you and bless you for being one of a kind.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, we encourage everybody to work on hotlines. I worked on a hotline for a number of years. It just keeps your skills up to speed. You're required to deal with real people on a regular basis. So I commend her for doing that. But ultimately, I would say that the vast majority of people that are in law enforcement want to help people. That's just the nature of the beast. We are public servants. That's what it comes down to. Are there rogue people out there? Of course there are, but most people that subject themselves to what law enforcement does, there's a core base that wants to help people. So not only negotiators, I would say, anybody that's involved in serving the public is wants to be helpful.
Sharon Geller, I think, has a fantastic question here. She says, what can an innocent hostage say or do to increase their chances of survival in a situation like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when we did hostage survival courses, it really depends on a relationship with the subject. For example, if your listener there worked at a bank during a bank robbery, and now you're talking about a trapped criminal, that's a whole different situation than a husband and wife situation. If you're an innocent and not involved in the subject at all, then we would ask probably to comply, don't resist, don't make a nuisance of yourself, and ultimately try to humanize yourself the best you can. And again, this would happen over time. It was not going to happen let's just use a bank robbery as an example, where now the person's trapped. He doesn't want to hurt anybody inside the bank. He just wanted to rob it, right? So now he's stuck with people inside, and over time there's going to be interactions, and we would just say that try to humanize yourself the best you can, so you're not the one that he would pick out to hurt. And to be honest with you, that rarely happens. It rarely happens where an innocent hostage in that type of situation would get hurt. There's going to be threats, no doubt, but the threats are made to change law enforcement or influence law enforcement, not necessarily to kill anybody or hurt anybody inside. So if you're an innocent, then I would say try to humanize, but also comply, and also don't try to do anything that is going to intensify the situation.
But they can get, people that have been held hostage can get the Stockholm syndrome, and they're very embarrassed about it when they come out. They're horrified by it. But if you look at the Stockholm syndrome and people that have survived being taken, like strangers that are taken, certainly in some England ones, they've been taken. They've befriended the hostage taker. And it's not about wanting to be a friend with them, it's about survival. And if you look at the ones that survived, they have formed a relationship with the hostage, which when actually they're released, and sometimes everybody else has been killed that they've held before and they're the only survivor, they have an embarrassment about it. And really, the Stockholm Syndrome is a definite way of keeping alive.
Susan Gould asks the question I think that we all knew would come. How concerned are you about the current state of the FBI in this administration, with both the appointees that they've chosen and the firings that have taken place?
Well, again, I've not been in the FBI for 10 years, so I don't have a real strong knowledge. I just don't. I've talked to a few people, but I really can't comment. It does sound like the people that are it's very non-traditional right now, and I think that's going throughout that's happening throughout this administration, just presidential administration. Things are being changed, but I don't really have a strong opinion about that because I just don't have the knowledge, and I don't really want to say anything that you know that I don't have knowledge about. So,
All right. Well, Mark and Kath, I want to thank both of you so much for a really interesting and worthwhile program. And, here at the Free Library, we're all about learning and new experiences and people gaining knowledge in areas where they didn't know very much. And the two of you have been really great. I mean, I'm proud, I think, of what we've been able to do with this hour. So, thank you so much. I hope that our paths will cross again. And to those of us in the audience, I'd just like to remind you, please join us again on the 25th. We'll be examining the life and personality of Pontius Pilate. I can guarantee you an interesting and worthwhile program. So I want to wish everyone a good day. Take care.
thanks,
you.
thanks everybody. Thanks, Dick, for
Thank you.
what you do as well.